Welcome to Final Reckoning, where betrayal meets brutal truth. What you just heard is only the beginning of Monica's story. Have you ever been abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you most? Hit subscribe, and let's walk this journey together. You collapsed in the middle of a boardroom presentation. Your parents were called. They said they'd come. But they never did. My name is Monica Davis, and I'm 30 years old. On paper, my life looks impressive. I work as a senior marketing strategist in downtown Chicago. I manage multi-million-dollar campaigns, and my boss constantly points to me as the workhorse of the department. I rent a loft apartment in Wicker Park, decorated with carefully chosen artwork, a balance of city hustle and quiet sanctuaries. By most standards, I've built a life worth admiring. But none of that mattered on the Tuesday morning when my body gave out. I was halfway through presenting quarterly projections to a row of executives, each one with arms folded, pens tapping, eyes trained on me like predators assessing prey. My slideshow advanced to the next chart, and I opened my mouth to explain. Only the words didn't come. Instead, a blinding pain seared behind my right eye. It was like someone had taken a poker from a fire and jammed it straight through my skull. The room tilted. My vision blurred. Someone called my name, sharp at first, then muffled, as though underwater. I remember the horror of trying to steady myself against the table, papers sliding from my hands, my voice stammering nonsense. Then nothing. Darkness swallowed everything. When I came to, machines beeped steadily around me. I was in a hospital bed, the sterile smell of antiseptic thick in the air, and 4 taped to my arm. A doctor approached, clipboard in hand, eyes kind but heavy. "Miss Davis," he said, "you collapsed at work. Severe dehydration and exhaustion, but we're running further tests. We contacted your emergency contacts, your parents." He hesitated, looking almost embarrassed. "They said they would come, but they haven't arrived yet." That sentence landed harder than the collapse itself. It wasn't the first time I'd been disappointed by them. But lying in a hospital bed, head pounding, body weak, hearing that the 2 people who had raised me, the ones who were supposed to love me unconditionally, couldn't be bothered to show up, it burned in a way I can't describe. I told myself it was the distance. Boston to Chicago wasn't around the corner. Flights had to be booked. Maybe they had obligations. Maybe they were waiting until morning. I grasped for excuses the way a drowning woman grasps at driftwood. But deep down, I knew the truth. It had always been this way. Growing up in our tidy suburban home outside Boston, we looked like the perfect family in Christmas card photos. My father, Frank Davis, ran his own small architecture firm. He had that crisp, buttoned-up appearance that screamed respectability. My mother, Diane, was an elementary school teacher, adored by her students for her patience and creativity. And then there was my older sister, Vanessa, 3 years my senior, with golden hair, flawless grades, and an effortless ability to be everything my parents wanted. And then there was me, Monica, the afterthought, the shadow, the one who always seemed to fall short. "Look at your sister's science fair project," Dad would beam, practically ignoring my own. "First place again. Why can't you be more like Vanessa?" Mom was gentler, but no less cutting. At parent-teacher conferences, she'd smile politely while I sat awkwardly beside her. "We know Monica has potential," she'd say. "But she just doesn't have Vanessa's drive." It didn't matter that I maintained a 3.8 GPA, debated at state competitions, and volunteered at the local shelter every weekend. It didn't matter that I painted and won awards, or that teachers praised my essays. Next to Vanessa's Princeton acceptance letter, student body presidency, and string of perfect A+s, I was invisible. Invisible. That's the word that defined my childhood. I remember my 16th birthday vividly. The weekend coincided with Vanessa's sorority formal. My parents drove 6 hours to help her get ready, leaving me with a store-bought cake on the kitchen counter and a note promising they'd celebrate next week. Next week never came. By the time graduation rolled around, I'd stopped expecting them to celebrate me. They came, yes, cameras flashing as I crossed the stage, but dinner afterward turned into a 2-hour conversation about Vanessa's engagement to Travis, the wealthy med student with a smile that belonged in a magazine. My acceptance into Northwestern University, a school I had fought tooth and nail to get into, barely warranted a nod. That was when I made my escape. Chicago represented freedom. No more constant comparisons. No more suffocating in Vanessa's shadow. I packed my bags and carved out a new identity, far from the picture-perfect colonial house with its white picket fence. For the first time, I could breathe. Still, the ache never left. I called on birthdays, sent Christmas gifts, tried to stay connected, even when they didn't reciprocate. And yet, despite every slight, every dismissal, every invisible wound, some part of me believed, hoped, that if a real crisis ever happened, they would show up. That deep down, behind the favoritism and neglect, they still cared. Lying in that hospital bed, the truth pressed down on me harder than any migraine ever had. They didn't. The machines beeped steadily, the fluorescent light buzzing faintly above me. I closed my eyes and wondered, if I disappeared tomorrow, would they even notice? Or would I simply vanish, leaving Vanessa's perfect family portrait untouched, unblemished by my absence? A nurse named Jennifer came in, adjusting my four. She gave me a warm smile that felt more genuine than anything I'd gotten from my parents in years. "No visitors tonight?" she asked casually. "My parents live out of state," I said quickly, though the words felt hollow. She didn't push, just patted my arm and said, "Well, you've got me until 7 a.m. And fair warning, I talk a lot. I almost laughed. Almost. Because in that moment, a stranger's lightheartedness was the only thing keeping me from unraveling. That night, staring at the silent phone on my bedside table, I understood something brutal. Maybe I wasn't just invisible. Maybe to them, I was expendable. And that realization was the beginning of everything that followed. If you've ever grown up in someone else's shadow, you'll understand why my hospital bed felt so painfully familiar. It wasn't the first time I'd been overlooked. It was simply the sharpest reminder. My story with Vanessa began the way all second-child stories in perfect families seem to, with comparisons. She was 3 years older than me, born with that kind of natural charisma that draws people like moths to a flame. Blonde, blue-eyed, with a laugh that carried across rooms and grades that guaranteed praise, Vanessa was the type of child parents brag about in Christmas letters. And me? I was the other one. When teachers asked my parents how I was doing, Mom would smile politely and redirect, "Well, Vanessa just won another academic award." At dinner parties, Dad introduced me as Vanessa's little sister, Monica, as though my identity existed only in relation to hers. It wasn't malicious, I told myself. It was just the way things were. But little by little, it carved pieces out of me. I can still hear Dad's voice, deep and dismissive, as he leaned over a science fair table when I was 12. I had built a model of the solar system out of painted styrofoam balls, carefully arranged and suspended from thin fishing line. He glanced once, nodded absently, and then motioned toward Vanessa's elaborate display of a functioning volcano she'd built 2 years earlier. "Look at what your sister did," he told the judges. "First place right out of the gate. She's always been so driven." That was the soundtrack of my childhood. When I brought home an A-, the question was always, why isn't it an A+ like Vanessa? When I placed second in an art competition, Mom reminded me, cheerfully, as though it were a compliment, that Vanessa had won first place the year before. It was relentless. By 16, I'd stopped trying to compete. My 16th birthday should have been special. For most girls, it's celebrated with balloons, friends, maybe even a sweet 16 party. Mine was marked by a lopsided store-bought cake and a note that read, "We'll celebrate next weekend, love Mom and Dad." That weekend never came. They had driven 6 hours instead to help Vanessa prepare for her sorority formal. She had the perfect gown, the perfect date, the perfect night. And I had a quiet kitchen, a flickering candle, and the knowledge that no matter how much I wanted their attention, I'd never earn it. By the time graduation came around, I had already stopped hoping. I walked across the stage at my high school in Boston, diploma in hand, and my parents beamed from the bleachers. But the smile wasn't for me. It was because Vanessa had just announced her engagement to Travis, the handsome med student from a wealthy family. The celebration dinner was filled with talk of wedding plans, Travis's internship at Mass General, and Vanessa's acceptance into graduate school. When I tried to mention my own acceptance into Northwestern University, Mom frowned faintly. "Chicago is so far away," she said, her tone tinged with disappointment. Vanessa will be staying close. That's what families do. Dad added a half-hearted, "It's a good school, Monica," though the way he said it made it sound more like a consolation prize than an achievement. So I moved to Chicago not just for school, but for air. Chicago became my sanctuary. I discovered what it felt like to walk into a cafe where no one knew Vanessa's name, to attend classes where professors judged me on my work, not on whether I measured up to my sister, to build friendships where I wasn't constantly the lesser Davis daughter. But the phone calls home were always the same. "How's work, Vanessa?" Mom would ask, her voice bright with excitement, before offering me the obligatory, "And you, Monica?" "Still busy." When Vanessa had her first child, I sent a hand-knitted blanket I'd stayed up nights to finish. It was never mentioned again. When Vanessa hosted Thanksgiving, my parents converted my childhood bedroom into a playroom for her kids without telling me. I ended up sleeping on a pull-out couch in the basement, listening to their laughter drift through the vents above me. The final straw came 2 years ago at Thanksgiving. I'd just been promoted to senior strategist at Horizon Media Group, a huge leap for me, one that meant I was finally handling campaigns worth millions. I wanted to share that. I wanted my parents to be proud. But as soon as I mentioned it, Dad checked his watch and asked if anyone wanted more turkey. The conversation turned back, inevitably, to Vanessa's children. Their school projects. Their piano recitals. Their perfect, golden lives. I left early the next morning, telling them I had a work emergency. No one asked if I made it back to Chicago safely. No one noticed my silence. 3 weeks later, Vanessa tagged me in a photo on Facebook. My parents, her husband, her kids, all of them smiling at a pumpkin patch, wearing coordinated scarves. The caption read, "Family complete." I wasn't in the picture. I wasn't even in the sentence. And yet, despite every bruise, every cut, every moment of being erased, I kept trying. I sent Christmas gifts, birthday cards, thoughtful texts. The responses, when they came, were short and perfunctory. "So when the doctor told me from the edge of my hospital bed, 'We called your parents,' they said they would come," something inside me still flickered with hope. But as the hours stretched on, that hope shriveled into something bitter and sharp. Because they weren't coming. They never had, and they never would. The cruelest part? Some stubborn part of me still wanted them to. That night, as the fluorescent lights hummed above me and my phone lay silent on the bedside table, I realized something brutal. All these years, I had been carrying the same silent prayer. Maybe this time they'll choose me. But the answer had always been the same. They didn't. The next morning, the doctor came in with a neurologist I hadn't seen before. Their expressions were too carefully arranged, the kind of professional neutrality that sets your heart racing before a word is spoken. "Miss Davis," the woman doctor began, pulling a chair to my bedside, "we've reviewed your tests." I tried to sit straighter, though the four tugged at my arm. My pulse thundered in my ears. Something about the way she avoided my eyes made my stomach clench. The neurologist stepped forward, a man in his 40s with an accent I couldn't place. "We found a mass," he said gently. "In your right frontal lobe." A mass. 2 words that detonated like grenades in my skull. "What do you mean, a mass?" I whispered, my mouth dry. "It could be several things," he explained carefully. "Inflammation, fluid buildup, or possibly a meningioma, a tumor. The MRI will give us clarity, but we do recommend surgery. The pressure it's creating is the reason you collapsed." A tumor. The word hung in the sterile air, heavy, poisonous. My mind rejected it, twisted it, tried to convince me I'd misheard. Tumors happen to other people. Older people. Unhealthy people. People whose stories ended up in sad Facebook posts and whispered conversations. Not me. Not Monica, 30 years old, who was supposed to be fighting for a promotion. Not fighting for her life. The room swayed. My hands trembled against the thin hospital blanket. "Surgery," I repeated numbly. "Brain surgery." The woman doctor nodded, her kind eyes finally meeting mine. "The procedure carries risks, as any surgery does, but this type of tumor is often benign. Still, it needs to be removed soon." I wanted to ask 100 questions. What if I said no? What were the chances of complications? Would I survive? But the only question that slipped from my lips was one I already knew the answer to. Did you tell my parents? The neurologist's lips pressed into a line. We called again this morning. Your father answered. He said they were making arrangements. They still haven't arrived. Something cracked inside me. Not loudly, not violently, but with the quiet devastation of a bridge giving way under too much weight. I turned my face to the wall, not wanting them to see the tears burning at the corners of my eyes. After they left, silence descended again, broken only by the rhythmic beep of machines. I stared at the white wall, wondering how I had arrived here, a hospital bed, a looming brain surgery, and no family by my side. It should have been different. If I had been Vanessa, my mother would have already flown in, fussing with pillows and demanding the best specialists. My father would be pacing the corridors, demanding updates. Vanessa's children would be drawing get-well cards. There would be flowers, casseroles, prayers. But I wasn't Vanessa. I was Monica, the expendable daughter, the afterthought, the one they could leave in a hospital bed and still caption their Facebook photos with "family complete." By afternoon, the loneliness was unbearable. My phone lay silent on the tray table, screen dark. I picked it up once, stared at my father's number, and put it back down. Why should I call them? Why should I beg for the crumbs of their concern? If they couldn't pick up a phone when the hospital called, they didn't deserve my voice now. It was Olivia, my coworker of only 3 months, who finally walked through the door. She carried a tote bag and the kind of hesitant smile that said she wasn't sure if she was intruding. Hey, stranger, she said lightly. I brought reinforcements. Pajamas, toiletries, your phone charger, and that book you never shut up about. She set the bag gently on the chair. I used the spare key you gave me. Hope that's okay. My throat tightened. She had thought of everything. Things my family hadn't even pretended to. I blinked hard, forcing a smile. Thank you. Really. She pulled a chair beside my bed and sank into it, studying me. You scared the hell out of everyone, you know. Collapsing in the middle of a presentation? That's dramatic even for our office. I laughed weakly, the sound catching in my throat. Guess I wanted to make an impression. Her smile faded. The doctor said you collapsed because you're exhausted. But that's not all, is it? I hesitated, then whispered the words aloud for the first time. They found a tumor. Olivia's eyes widened, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh my God, Monica. She reached across the bed, covering my shaking hand with hers. You don't have to go through this alone. The kindness nearly broke me. I pressed my lips together, swallowing the sob rising in my chest. My parents aren't coming, I admitted. The hospital called them. They never came. Her jaw tightened, anger flashing in her eyes. A 2-hour flight, Monica. That's all it is. And they didn't bother. I shook my head, too tired to defend them, too tired to explain the decades of neglect that made their absence unsurprising. It's fine, I lied. I'll manage. But even as I said it, the truth pressed against my chest, suffocating me. I had never felt so utterly, terrifyingly alone. That night, a nurse named Jennifer came on shift. She was older, maybe late 30s, with warm brown eyes and a quick, easy humor. As she checked my force, she asked casually, "No visitors?" "My parents live out of state," I said again, the excuse tasting like ash. Jennifer raised an eyebrow but didn't push. Instead, she pulled a stool closer. "Well, you've got me until morning. Fair warning, I talk a lot. You'll either get comfort or a headache." To my surprise, I smiled. And for the first time since the word tumor had entered my vocabulary, I felt a tiny flicker of something besides fear. Maybe it was hope. Or maybe it was the beginning of realizing that sometimes family isn't the people who share your DNA. Sometimes it's the ones who show up when everyone else disappears. Hospitals are strange places. Hours stretch into days, days blur into nights, and the walls begin to feel less like protection and more like a cage. By the 3rd day, my body had adjusted to the beeping machines and the endless poking of needles, but my mind was unraveling. I was waiting for test results, waiting for surgery to be scheduled, waiting for a phone call from my parents that never came. Loneliness sits heavier when you're surrounded by people. Nurses bustling in and out, patients shuffling down the hall with 4 poles, doctors scribbling notes on charts. It should have felt like company. But it only emphasized how invisible I was to the people who mattered most. That night, unable to sleep, I reached for my phone. My plan was innocent enough. Check emails, maybe distract myself with mindless scrolling. I told myself I wouldn't open social media. I couldn't stomach seeing Vanessa's perfect, polished life paraded across a screen while I lay in a hospital gown, hair greasy, incision looming. But temptation is cruel. Within minutes, my thumb betrayed me. A red notification blinked. Vanessa Davis tagged you in a post. For a moment I froze, hope fluttering in my chest. Maybe she had posted something kind. Maybe she had rallied my parents, urged them to come, acknowledged my absence with concern. Maybe for once, I wasn't forgotten. I tapped. The photo loaded slowly, as if mocking me, each pixel cutting deeper than the last. There they were, my entire family, grinning in front of the entrance to Six Flags New England. My parents, Vanessa, her husband Travis, their two perfect children in matching custom t-shirts that read, Davis Family Fun Day 2025. The caption below twisted the knife. Family day without the drama. Perfect weather, perfect company, perfect day. My vision blurred. I blinked, but the words didn't change. Without the drama. That was me. I was the drama. The one whose absence made family outings perfect. The expendable piece in their smiling puzzle. Scrolling down only made it worse. My Aunt Susan had commented, the perfect Davis family outing. My cousin wrote, making memories that matter. Over 50 likes, a stream of heart emojis, fire emojis, comments gushing over how complete we looked. Complete. While I lay in a hospital bed, awaiting confirmation of whether I had a brain tumor that could alter my life forever, my family was eating cotton candy and riding roller coasters. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I set it face down on the tray table, my hands trembling. My chest felt tight, suffocating. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. They didn't deserve my tears. Yet my body betrayed me. Silent sobs racked my frame, my throat tightening until I could hardly breathe. Why did I expect anything different? Hadn't this been the story all along? Vanessa shines. Monica disappears. Vanessa hosts. Monica isn't invited. Vanessa needs help. Everyone shows up. Monica collapses in a hospital bed, and the caption reads, without the drama. I curled onto my side, clutching the thin hospital blanket like a lifeline. Memories surged unbidden. My 16th birthday with the uneaten cake, my graduation overshadowed by Vanessa's engagement, my childhood bedroom turned into a playroom without a word. It was all connected. Every slight, every dismissal, every erasure had led to this moment. Me alone, staring at a glowing screen, while my family declared themselves happier without me. The next morning, Jennifer entered on her shift, carrying her usual easy smile. She stopped short when she saw my puffy eyes. Rough night. I didn't answer at first. My throat ached from crying, my chest hollow. Finally, I whispered, they went to an amusement park. Her brow furrowed. Who did? My parents. My sister. They tagged me. Captioned it Family Day without the drama. Jennifer's lips tightened, fury flashing across her face before she masked it with professional calm. That's cruel. It's not new, I admitted, voice cracking. It's just the latest version. She set down the chart and sat at the edge of my bed. Listen to me, Monica. Their actions don't define your worth. They reflect who they are, not who you are. I wanted to believe her. But the photo was burned into my mind. My father with my nephew on his shoulders, my mother laughing as she helped my niece with cotton candy, Vanessa kissing Travis in front of a roller coaster. They looked happy. Whole. Complete. Without me. The despair was bone deep, suffocating. For the first time since the diagnosis, I wondered if it would even matter if I didn't make it through surgery. Would anyone in Boston even notice, beyond a polite announcement at Vanessa's next dinner party? Later that afternoon, Olivia returned, cheerful as always, carrying magazines and a bag of snacks. I thought you'd be craving chocolate, she said, tossing a Hershey's bar onto the tray. Hospital food can only take you so far. I tried to smile, but the weight in my chest made it collapse into a grimace. She studied me, then glanced at the face-down phone. "You looked at something you shouldn't have, didn't you?" I nodded, shame flushing my cheeks. "Vanessa tagged me. They were at Six Flags." The caption, my voice cracked. "They were better off without me." Olivia's expression hardened. "Monica, that's garbage. They're cowards." People who can't face their own neglect always reframe the victim as the drama. "You're not the problem, they are." Her certainty was a lifeline. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like I was drowning alone. Still, despair clung like a shadow. That night, lying awake, I whispered into the darkness. Why wasn't I enough? The machines beeped. The hallway echoed with distant footsteps. But no answer came. Only silence. The morning sunlight leaked through the blinds, streaking pale lines across the hospital floor. I hadn't slept. My mind had been looping through the same reel all night. My family at Six Flags, cotton candy smiles, without the drama glowing beneath their faces. Every time I closed my eyes, the caption seared me like a brand. When the door opened and Dr. Chen walked in with a neurologist, I knew before they spoke that something was wrong. Their expressions carried the heavy stillness of people preparing to deliver bad news. "Miss Davis," Dr. Chen said gently, pulling up a chair beside my bed. She held a tablet, her hands steady but her voice careful. "We have the results of your MRI." The neurologist turned the screen toward me. An image of my brain glowed in shades of gray and white. There, stark and undeniable, was a pale spot pressed against the edge of the frontal lobe. "We've confirmed it," he said. "A meningioma. It's a tumor pressing against the membranes of your brain. Non-cancerous, but it's already large enough to cause significant pressure. The collapse you experienced was a direct result of that pressure. And without intervention, the symptoms will only worsen." The words floated above me, as if they belonged to someone else's story. Tumor. Surgery. Pressure. Risk. "You'll need surgery," Dr. Chen continued. "Within the week. The procedure carries risks, yes, but given your age and otherwise good health, the odds are strongly in your favor. Recovery will be lengthy, but possible." Brain surgery. 2 words that should never apply to someone barely 30. 2 words that turned the boardroom collapse from an embarrassing moment into something life-threatening. I tried to form a response, but my throat was tight, my chest constricted. All I managed was a faint whisper. "When?" "As soon as possible," the neurologist said. "We'd like to schedule within the next 4 to 5 days." My gaze drifted to the silent phone on the tray table. I thought of my parents, still smiling in their amusement park photos, blissfully oblivious to the fact that their younger daughter was being told she needed brain surgery. And I realized with brutal clarity, I was going to face this alone. When they left, I turned my face to the wall. For a long moment, I just lay there, the tears rolling silently down my cheeks, soaking the pillow. I'd always told myself that in a real crisis, my family would show up. That despite the years of favoritism, despite the invisibility, there was still something underneath, some core of love that would rise in the darkest moment. But the darkest moment was here. And they weren't. The door creaked open again. Olivia slipped in, a duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Her bright eyes scanned my face immediately, catching the tear stains. "Hey," she said softly. "Bad news." I swallowed hard. "They want to operate. This week. Brain surgery." For a moment, silence hung heavy between us. Then Olivia set down the bag and sat on the edge of my bed, her hand finding mine without hesitation. "Then you're not going through it alone," she said firmly. "I'm here." The tears spilled faster, not because I doubted her, but because she meant it, and she was the last person who should have had to. We'd known each other for only 3 months. She was technically still my junior at work, a copywriter fresh out of grad school. And yet, she had already done more for me in 3 days than my own family had in 30 years. "Olivia, you don't have to." "I do," she interrupted. "Because somebody needs to. And apparently, the people who should don't care enough to bother." Her voice sharpened with anger on my behalf, and for a moment, I almost believed that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as invisible as I felt. That evening, Jennifer came in for her shift. She greeted Olivia warmly, like they had known each other for years instead of days. "So you're the famous coworker," Jennifer said with a smile, adjusting my fore. "Glad she's got someone in her corner." Olivia shrugged, but her expression was fierce. "I'm not leaving her side." Jennifer nodded approvingly. "Good. She's going to need people. Surgery isn't easy. Recovery isn't either. But with support, it's survivable." I listened to them talking over me, two women who had no obligation to care, and I felt something shift. It wasn't comfort exactly, not yet, but a faint stirring of strength. If family wouldn't show up, maybe I could build my own. The next few days passed in a blur of pre-surgical preparations. Blood work, neurological tests, consultations where the doctors rattled off risks in clinical monotone: infection, bleeding, seizures, even stroke. Each possibility was a new weight on my chest. At night, when the hospital quieted, fear crept in. What if I didn't wake up? What if the surgery left me unable to speak, or think, or work? What if I lost myself on that operating table? One night, Jennifer found me awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling. She pulled up a chair, her voice low and steady. "Scared? Terrified," I admitted. "Good," she said matter-of-factly. "Only fools walk into brain surgery without fear." But here's the thing. Fear means you understand what's at stake. Fear means you're alive. Hold on to that. Use it. I studied her, searching for the catch. But there was none. Just a nurse with tired eyes who had clearly seen this before. "Did you ever go through something like this?" I asked quietly. Jennifer's gaze flickered. "Breast cancer. 10 years ago. Stage 3. My husband left. My sister lived overseas. I went through chemo and radiation completely alone. My breath caught. How did you survive it?" She smiled faintly. "One day at a time. And by letting people in, even strangers. Sometimes the family you find is stronger than the family you're born into." Her words sank deep, lodging in the hollow places my parents had carved. The morning of the 4th day, Olivia arrived with a clipboard. "They need an emergency contact for the surgery paperwork," she explained. I hesitated, shame rising. Normally, that line should have read Mom or Dad. But my parents hadn't even bothered to call. "Put me," Olivia said quickly, reading my hesitation. "I'll be your emergency contact." "Olivia, that's not." "Obviously it is," she snapped, then softened. "Look, Monica, somebody has to. And you don't need people who only show up when it's convenient. You need someone who's here now." "That's me." The pen scratched her name across the form. My throat burned with unshed tears. For the first time in days, I felt like maybe I wasn't entirely alone. But that night, when the lights dimmed and the machines hummed softly around me, despair still crept back. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, whispering the words I'd never dared to say aloud. Why wasn't I enough for them? No answer came. Only silence. And in that silence, I realized the people who were supposed to hold me had already let me fall. Now, I had to find the strength to rise without them. The day of the surgery arrived faster than I was ready for. Hospitals have a way of compressing time. One moment you're being told we'll schedule within the week, and the next you're signing papers, changing into a thin hospital gown, and feeling your pulse race as if it might hammer straight through your chest. Dr. Patel, the neurosurgeon, explained the steps once more, his tone steady and practiced. "We'll make an incision, remove a section of skull, carefully extract the tumor, and close it. The procedure will take about 5 hours. Recovery in ICU, then a step-down unit, then rehabilitation. Given your age, prognosis is good." The words should have reassured me, but all I heard was skull, tumor risks. Olivia was there that morning, a duffel bag at her feet and a determined set to her jaw. She'd taken a personal day just to sit with me before they wheeled me in. She pretended cheerfulness, pulling out magazines and a deck of cards. "We can play Go Fish until they call for you," she teased. I tried to laugh, but my throat was tight. "You don't have to do this," I whispered. "Monica," she said firmly, "I'm your emergency contact now. I do have to do this. That's what family does." Her words pierced something raw inside me. She wasn't my family. Not by blood. Not by history. But she was showing up. And in that moment, that mattered more than anything. Jennifer came in before her shift officially started, still in her street clothes, just to check on me. She placed a slip of paper in my hand. These are names of patients who've gone through something similar. They'd love to talk to you during recovery if you want. Sometimes, knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. I clutched the paper like a lifeline. Thank you, I whispered. She squeezed my hand. You've got this, Monica. We'll be here when you wake up. When the orderly finally arrived to wheel me toward the operating room, my body shook with a fear I couldn't disguise. Olivia walked beside the bed, her hand gripping mine until they stopped her at the doors. I'll be here, she promised. You're not alone. The anesthesiologist leaned over me. Count backward from 10, he instructed. 10 and 9, 8. I never made it to 7. Darkness swallowed me whole. Waking after brain surgery isn't dramatic like in the movies. There's no sudden gasp, no triumphant music. It's a haze of pain and confusion, voices floating in and out, machines beeping, hands touching, adjusting, measuring. I drifted in and out, the world fractured into fragments. But when clarity finally pierced the fog, the first face I saw wasn't my mother. It wasn't my father. It was Olivia. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, her eyes rimmed red from exhaustion, but she smiled through it. Hey there, she said softly. Surgery went great. Tumor's gone. You're going to be fine. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them. You stayed. I croaked. Of course I stayed, she said, pressing a tiny ice chip to my lips. What kind of emergency contact would I be if I left? Jennifer appeared a little later, still in her scrubs. Told you I talk a lot, she joked, adjusting my fore. You're stuck with me now. They weren't related to me. They didn't share my DNA. But they were here. They showed up. The irony stung. The people who should have been here, the ones whose absence carved scars into me, were silent. No calls. No flowers. Not even a message asking if I survived. On the third day in ICU, as the swelling eased and the pain dulled into something manageable, Olivia pulled out my phone. You've got a pile of notifications, she said gently. I braced myself, then took it. Dozens of emails, work updates, social media alerts. But not a single message from my parents. Not one from Vanessa. The silence was louder than any words could have been. That night, when Jennifer came by during her break, I confessed the truth I had been swallowing for days. They don't even know. I had brain surgery and they don't know. And maybe I don't want them to. Jennifer sat on the edge of my bed, her eyes steady on mine. That's not cowardice, Monica. That's self-preservation. But listen, if you want closure, at some point, you'll need to speak your truth. Not for them. For you. Her words lingered long after she left. Speak my truth. Could I? Did I even have the strength? By the fourth day, I was moved to a regular room. My head was wrapped in bandages, my body weak, but my mind clearer. That's when my phone buzzed violently on the tray table. 20 missed calls. 17 from Dad. 22 from Mom. 26 from Vanessa. For a heartbeat, hope flared. Maybe they had finally realized, finally come to check on me, finally wanted to know if I was alive. But then I opened the text. We need you. Answer immediately. Your grandfather is in the hospital. Stroke. Doctors say he might not make it. He's asking for you. Grandpa Howard. The one person in my family who had ever truly seen me. The one who had sat proudly at my high school art show when my parents skipped for Vanessa's debate. The one who called me monthly, who sent birthday cards with personal notes, who taught me how to fish at Crystal Lake. He was asking for me. And my parents, silent while I lay in brain surgery, suddenly needed me. Anger surged hot and fierce through my veins, burning away the lingering fog of anesthesia. They hadn't come for me, but now they wanted me to come for them. I gripped the phone so tightly my hand shook. Olivia's voice broke through my storm. What is it? I handed her the phone. Her eyes scanned the messages, her jaw tightening. They're unbelievable. The bitterness in my chest hardened into resolve. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to chase. If they wanted answers, they were going to hear the truth, the whole, brutal truth. For 30 years, I had swallowed silence. Now it was my turn to speak. The phone rang again, vibrating insistently on the tray table. I stared at it for a long moment, watching my father's name flash across the screen. For 30 years, I had been the one chasing, the one calling, the one shrinking myself to fit the empty spaces they allowed me. But not this time. This time if I answered, it would be on my terms. I picked up. Monica? Finally. My father's voice came through sharp, impatient, as though I had been inconveniencing him. Where have you been? We've been trying to reach you for days. I took a breath, steadying my voice. I've been in the hospital, Dad. There was a pause, just long enough for me to hear the murmur of voices in the background. My mother, Vanessa. Then his voice again, suddenly cautious. Hospital? What for? I collapsed at work last week, I said evenly. The doctors found a brain tumor. I had surgery 4 days ago. Silence. For the first time in my life, my father had nothing to say. When he finally spoke, his voice was subdued, almost strangled. Are you serious? Yes, I said, my tone flat. I went into brain surgery without a single family member by my side. Not a call. Not a visit. Nothing. Just silence. Until now, when you needed something. Monica? It was my mother's voice now, faint and wavering, as though she had grabbed the phone. Why didn't you tell us? I laughed, sharp and bitter, the sound pulling painfully at the bandages on my head. The hospital called you. Multiple times. You said you'd come. And then I saw the photos. 6 Flags. Family day without the drama. That's what you were doing while I was lying in a hospital bed waiting to hear if I had cancer. Another silence. I imagined their faces. Pale, uncomfortable, Vanessa shifting in the background. We didn't think it was that serious, my father said finally, his voice defensive. The nurse said exhaustion, dehydration. And you didn't think to call back? I cut him off, my voice rising. Didn't think to check? Didn't think maybe your daughter deserved more than being written off as the drama? You left me to face brain surgery alone. Do you have any idea what that felt like? The line crackled. My father stammered. We should have checked. I'm sorry. The words should have mattered. They should have landed like a bomb. Instead, they rang hollow. Too late. Too little. 30 years too late. How's Grandpa? I asked abruptly, cutting through the tension. My father exhaled heavily, grateful for the shift. Not good. Major stroke. He's conscious but weak. He keeps asking for you. I can't travel, I said. Doctor's orders. But I want to talk to him. Can you set up a video call? Of course, my father said quickly. But your mother and sister want to talk to you now. Not now, I interrupted. I'm tired. Tell Grandpa I'll call tomorrow. I hung up before they could answer. For a long moment, I sat in silence, the phone heavy in my lap. My heart was racing, my head throbbing, but a strange calm settled in too. For the first time, I hadn't swallowed my pain. I hadn't let them redirect, diminish, excuse. I had spoken my truth, raw and unfiltered. And for once, they had no words. The next day, the video call came through. My father fumbled with the camera angle, my mother hovering behind him, Vanessa off to the side. But all I saw was Grandpa Howard. His face was thinner, grayer than I remembered, but when his eyes lit up at the sight of me, tears sprang to mine instantly. Katie girl, he rasped, using the nickname only he called me. There you are. I tried to angle the phone so he wouldn't see the bandages on my head, but his sharp eyes caught everything. What happened to you? He asked. Just a little surgery, I said lightly. Nothing to worry about. Liar, he said with a ghost of his old smile. Your father told me. Brain tumor. My brave girl. The dam broke. Tears spilled down my cheeks. Even now, even dying, he was more concerned about me than anyone else had ever been. I'm okay, Grandpa, I whispered. The doctors say I'll recover. Good, he murmured. His eyes fluttered closed for a moment, then reopened with effort. Listen to me, Katie girl. The lake house, it's yours. Papers already signed. You'll take care of it. Shock froze me. Grandpa. No arguments, he said, his voice weak but firm. Always your special place. It belongs with you. My heart clenched. The lake house at Crystal Lake, the only place I had ever felt truly at peace as a child. The place where Grandpa had taught me to fish, where we'd sat on the porch during summer storms, where I had felt seen. "I'll take care of it," I promised, choking on the words. "One more thing," he said, his gaze flicking past me, toward where my parents stood off camera. "Stop running. Talk to them. Make them hear you. Then decide." Before I could respond, his eyes closed again, the effort exhausting him. The camera shifted, and suddenly my father's face filled the screen, pale and uncharacteristically uncertain. He opened his mouth, then froze at the sight of my bandages. "My God, Monica, your head." "Yes," I said coldly. "Brain surgery. Remember?" For once, he had no reply. My mother leaned in, her hand flying to her mouth. "Your beautiful hair. Of all the things to focus on. Not my health. Not my fear. Not my solitude. My hair. It'll grow back," I said flatly. "Unlike your daughter's trust." Vanessa finally stepped into frame, her expression arranged into sympathy. "If we had known it was serious, Monica, would you?" I cut her off. "Because the hospital called. And instead of checking on me, you posted about how much better family was without me. Do you know what it's like to read that while waiting to hear if you have cancer?" Her cheeks flushed. "That wasn't what I meant." "Yes, it was," I said, my voice steady now. "You've always been happier when I'm not around. And now you've said it out loud for the world to see." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. For once, my family had no script, no easy dismissal. I stared straight into the camera. "You left me to face death alone. Don't you dare tell me you love me. Love shows up. Love makes someone a priority. And none of you did." Then, before they could answer, I ended the call. My hands were shaking, but my heart felt strangely light. For the first time, I had spoken the truth they'd spent decades trying to bury. And for the first time, I felt free. The rhythmic clatter of the train lulled most passengers into quiet dozing, but for me, it was a drumbeat of nerves. 2 weeks after brain surgery, I should have been in bed, healing. Dr. Patel had practically begged me not to travel. But Grandpa Howard was in a hospital in Boston, and I couldn't stay away. I didn't go for my parents. I didn't go for Vanessa. I went for him. Olivia insisted on coming with me. She called herself my medical bodyguard, and she wasn't joking. She kept track of my medications, made sure I stayed hydrated, and practically ordered me to nap against her shoulder. "I'm not letting you collapse on a moving train," she said firmly, though her hand was gentle when she adjusted the blanket around me. By the time we reached South Station, I was pale, trembling, and exhausted. Olivia hailed a cab, and instead of going straight to the hospital, she insisted on a hotel. "You need one night of real rest," she said. "We'll face them tomorrow." And she was right. The next morning, we arrived at Massachusetts General. My stomach churned as we walked through the sterile hallways. I hadn't told my family I was coming. I couldn't stomach the idea of them controlling this moment. When I entered Grandpa Howard's room, luck was on my side. He was alone. His eyes lit up instantly when he saw me. "Katie girl," he said, his voice still slurred but stronger than I expected. "You came." "Of course I came," I whispered, leaning down to kiss his cheek. Wild horses couldn't keep me away. He reached for my hand, his grip weak but warm. His eyes scanned my face, pausing on the bandages peeking out from beneath my knit cap. "You shouldn't have traveled so soon after surgery," he scolded gently. "Pot kettle," I teased, gesturing to his hospital bed. He chuckled, and for a moment, it felt like I was a little girl again, sitting with him at the lake house porch, listening to loons cry across Crystal Lake. Before we could say more, the door opened. My parents and Vanessa walked in, carrying coffee cups and paper bags from the cafeteria. They froze at the sight of me sitting beside Grandpa's bed. "Kay," my mother began, then corrected herself awkwardly. "Monica, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be traveling." "Hello to you too, Mom," I said dryly. "I'm fine. Thanks for asking." Dad set his coffee down, recovering first. "We didn't know you were coming. You should have told us. We would have picked you up at the station." "I managed," I said, gesturing to Olivia, who stood quietly in the corner. "This is Olivia." She's been taking care of me since the surgery. The implication hung in the air like smoke, since you weren't there. Vanessa shifted, her perfect posture faltering just slightly. You look good. Considering. Brain surgery, Vanessa, I said bluntly. You can say it. It's not contagious. Grandpa chuckled weakly, then grew serious. Good. You're all here. Time for some truth-telling. Dad, you need to rest, my father protested. Shut up, Franklin, Grandpa said sharply, surprising us all. I'm 83, I've had a massive stroke, and I'm dying. I'll rest soon enough. Right now, we're going to talk. No one argued. Grandpa Howard had always commanded respect, but in that moment, frail and pale as he was, his authority was absolute. He turned first to my parents. You failed Monica. Over and over. You gave Vanessa everything. Attention, praise, priority, and left nothing for your younger daughter but scraps. You made her invisible in her own family. Mom flushed scarlet. That's not true. We love both our daughters. Love isn't real if it's not equitable. Grandpa cut her off. You never saw Monica for herself. You only saw how she measured up to Vanessa. You crushed her under comparisons and then wondered why she pulled away. Dad opened his mouth to protest, but Grandpa raised a shaking hand. Don't. Just listen. Then he turned his gaze to Vanessa. And you accepted it. Enjoyed it. Thrived on it. You never once stood up for your sister. You never once shared the spotlight. You let their favoritism elevate you while it erased her. Vanessa's composure cracked. That's not fair. I can't help if Monica always felt overshadowed. I didn't ask to be compared. I spoke then, my voice quiet but firm. No, but you made sure I never forgot it. The Facebook post, family without the drama, that wasn't an accident. That was a choice. You knew I was in the hospital. You knew, and you still chose to erase me publicly. Vanessa flushed, looking down. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said, steel in my voice. You've always been happier when I wasn't around. But congratulations, Vanessa. You got your wish. I faced brain surgery alone. No visits. No calls. No family. The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Dad stood, pacing the small room. This isn't fair. We made one mistake. One. We should have checked on you at the hospital, yes. But to act like we've been terrible parents your entire life. Sit down, Franklin, Grandpa snapped. And listen for once. Dad sat, sullen like a chastised child. Grandpa's eyes softened as he turned back to me. Monica, your turn. Say what needs saying. All of it. I drew in a shaky breath, my hands trembling in my lap. For 30 years, I had swallowed my pain. Now, with Grandpa's blessing, I let it pour out. I spent my entire childhood trying to be seen by you, I began, looking directly at my parents. I brought home good grades, won awards, volunteered, worked harder than anyone. And it was never enough. Never as good as Vanessa. You never once told me you were proud of me without adding a comparison. Do you know why I moved to Chicago? Not for the job. To escape. To finally breathe without being measured against her. Mom was crying now, silent tears streaking her face. Dad looked grim, his jaw tight. Vanessa crossed her arms, defensive but visibly shaken. I had brain surgery, I continued, my voice breaking. I could have died. And I lay there alone, because I didn't believe my own family cared enough to show up. And you proved me right. You went to an amusement park. You posted about how much better life was without me. And I saw it. I will never unsee it. The room was heavy with silence. Grandpa reached for my hand again, his eyes proud, fierce. That's my girl. Brave enough to face the truth. He turned back to my parents. So what are you going to do with it? Keep pretending? Or finally change? No one spoke. I stood slowly, my body still fragile but my voice steady. I'm not asking for perfection. I'm not asking you to undo 30 years. I'm asking for change. Real change. To be seen. To be valued. To matter. The monitor beside Grandpa beeped steadily, a reminder of time slipping away. I glanced at him, and he nodded faintly, giving me strength. I'm not invisible anymore, I said finally. Not to myself. And if you can't see me, that's on you. Not me. With that, I stepped back, my chest heaving, my heart raw but lighter than it had ever been. For the first time, I had claimed my place in the family, not as the forgotten daughter, not as the shadow, but as myself. And for the first time, they had no choice but to face it. The silence in the room was so heavy it seemed to press against my chest. My parents sat stiffly in the vinyl chairs, Mom's hands clenched in her lap, Dad's jaw tight, his eyes darting anywhere but mine. Vanessa leaned against the windowsill, her perfect composure finally cracking, her arms crossed in a defensive knot. The only sound was the steady beep of Grandpa's heart monitor. Then his voice broke the tension. Weak, yes, but laced with a steel I'd known my whole life. This family dies with me, unless you change. My father's head jerked toward him, startled. Dad. Quiet, Franklin. Grandpa's eyes flashed, the same eyes that had glared across chessboards and fishing docks, never allowing me to quit when I was young. I've watched long enough. You failed, Monica, and you failed yourselves. And I won't leave this earth without saying it. Mom's lips trembled. We didn't mean. You didn't mean? Grandpa's voice rose, raw with emotion. You had 30 years to mean something. 30 years to show that girl she mattered. Instead, you let her grow up invisible. You clapped the loudest for Vanessa and left Monica to clap for herself. You told yourselves it was harmless, just comparisons. But comparisons cut deeper than knives. Dad's face reddened. We supported her. We paid for her education. Don't you dare reduce love to tuition checks. Grandpa snapped, his frail hand trembling but his gaze sharp. You think paying bills erases neglect? You think providing a house makes up for never making it a home for both of your daughters? The words landed like blows. Mom covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking, but I couldn't tell if it was from grief or shame. Grandpa turned his gaze to Vanessa next. And you? You basked in it. You soaked up every ounce of attention while your sister was starved of it. You saw the favoritism and you smiled. You let it serve you. And when she finally built her own life, far away, you mocked her for it. Called her the drama. Vanessa's face flushed crimson. That's not fair. I never asked for them to compare us. I can't help being successful. No one blames you for succeeding, I said quietly, my voice steady in the charged air. But you chose to make it harder. You didn't just let their favoritism happen. You leaned into it. You enjoyed it. And when I was in the hospital, you didn't just ignore me. You tagged me in a photo that declared your happiness was greater without me. Her lips parted as though to argue, but no words came. Grandpa coughed weakly, each sound a painful reminder of how little time he had left. Do you know what that means, Vanessa? To erase someone in plain sight? To tell the world, my family is better off without her? That's cruelty, not ignorance. Vanessa looked down, shame creeping into her features at last. I felt my voice rising, anger and grief entwining after years of silence. Do you have any idea what it felt like? To collapse in a boardroom, be told I had a brain tumor, and realize the only people who cared enough to show up were strangers? To see my own family laughing at an amusement park while I lay in a hospital bed wondering if I'd even survive surgery. Tears welled in my eyes, but I didn't look away. I thought stupidly maybe that in a real crisis you'd come. That despite everything you'd show up. But you didn't. You chose cotton candy and roller coasters over me. Dad's hands gripped the arms of his chair, so tightly his knuckles blanched. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. We made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But Monica, we're your family. We love you. I shook my head. No. Love shows up. Love means more than words and holiday cards. Love means you sit beside someone when they're scared, not when it's convenient. You don't get to call it love when the only time you reach for me is when you need something. My mother sobbed openly now, tears streaking down her face. We never realized how deeply we hurt you. That's the problem, I replied. You never realized. Or maybe you did, and you just didn't care enough to stop. Grandpa squeezed my hand, his voice softer but still cutting. She's telling you the truth. You've got one chance left to hear it. Don't waste it. The room felt suffocating, the weight of 3 decades finally crashing down in a single conversation. My parents sat there, Stripped of excuses, Vanessa exposed in her complicity. For once, they couldn't rewrite the story. I took a shaky breath, summoning the last of my strength. Here's what I need. If this family has any future at all, I need to be seen. I need to be valued for who I am, not who I'm not. I need my accomplishments acknowledged without being compared to Vanessa. I need to matter. If you can't give me that, then I'll keep building my own family with the people who have shown up. Olivia's name hung silently in my mind. Jennifer's too. The people who had been my real family when I needed one. Vanessa finally lifted her gaze. "I'm sorry," she whispered, the words brittle, uncertain. "That post, I wasn't thinking. It was thoughtless." "No," I corrected softly but firmly. "It was cruel. But at least now you know what it cost me. And it's up to you whether you change." "Not me." For a moment, no one spoke. My father's shoulders slumped, my mother's sobs grew quieter, and Vanessa stared at the floor, her cheeks wet with tears she rarely allowed anyone to see. Grandpa leaned back against his pillows, exhaustion washing over him, but his eyes glinted with pride as they lingered on me. "You did it, Katie girl. You spoke your truth. That's all I ever wanted for you." I squeezed his frail hand, my heart aching and full all at once. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the invisible daughter. I was the one holding the mirror, forcing them all to see what they had done. And whether or not they changed, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would never be invisible again. 6 months later, the lake breathed like a sleeping animal. Soft ripples, low hush, a thin mist lifting off the water as the sun pushed gold across the treeline. I stood on the dock with the keys to the lake house biting into my palm, their weight familiar now, not just metal but history, promise, and a different kind of inheritance than anyone in my family had ever taught me to expect. The cabin looked smaller than it had when I was a kid. The cedar siding Grandpa stained every other summer had grayed into a dignified silver. The screen door still squeaked on the third step of opening. Same note, same complaint. I used to laugh at that sound when I was 8. Now it made my throat tighten with a grief that felt gentler than it had in the spring, like sea glass sanded down by time. I'd come up the night before with Olivia. She'd taken the driver's seat as always, a steady hand on the wheel, the exact kind of human you want guiding a long road when your head still throbs with phantom pains if you push yourself too far. At the cabin, we unpacked quietly, grocery bags thumping the old wood counter, fresh sheets in the small bedroom that had been mine since I could write my name, a vase of grocery store sunflowers brightening the kitchen table. The evenings smelled like pine and lemon oil and something else, something like arrival. Grief happens in uneven fits, no matter how many checklists you write or how grown you think you are. After Grandpa's funeral in Boston, modest, dignified, a handful of old friends and neighbors and more nurses than our family deserved, I hid in my Chicago apartment for 2 weeks. I slept, ate toast, and learned the exact pattern of the street light outside my window. When I finally returned to work part-time, my inbox was a small mountain. Richard had sent a brisk, "Glad you're on the mend" message that read like a performance review. I ignored the undertone, set boundaries with a precision I'd only learned by surviving the spring, and came back at my pace. Olivia guarded that line like a mother wolf. Therapy became a standing Wednesday. There's no romance to healing. It's stomach knots and old scripts and practicing sentences out loud so you can say them without shaking. Once a week I met with Dr. Patel's team for neurologic follow-ups. Twice a week I did balance exercises that made me feel like a toddler learning stairs. Jennifer texted articles about recovery and memes about hospital food. On the worst nights, when the old ache flared, a pain that wasn't in my skull so much as beneath my sternum, she'd call and talk about nothing. Her cats, a podcast episode, a recipe that went comically wrong. Kindness, I've learned, is often the opposite of grand. It's ordinary and stubborn and repeated. My parents called on Sundays. The first time I let it go to voicemail. The second, I answered with Olivia on speaker at my kitchen table, and we stayed on for less than 5 minutes. They didn't know how to apologize. I didn't know how to accept something that wasn't quite that yet. But we kept the line alive. One Sunday, my mother said, "Monica, I saw your campaign on the stadium boards." She didn't add a comparison. She didn't say Vanessa's name. The quiet after those words felt like space someone had finally cleared for me to stand in. Vanessa and I were slower. She sent an email that started 3 different times with 3 different salutations before she found a voice that didn't sound like hers or our mother's. I wrote back, firm, not cruel. We agreed on rules. No social media posts with my name. No half-jokes that were really knives. No, you know how mom is shortcuts to excuse history. We didn't become sisters overnight. But we stopped being enemies built by a system that told one of us we were everything and the other we were extra. That's a start. At the lake house, closure didn't arrive like music swelling. It arrived in chores. A new lock on the boathouse door, a note taped inside the pantry with the Wi-Fi password, the slow unfurling of a rug that smelled like summers when my legs were thin and my hair was sunburned at the part. I found my grandfather's tackle box exactly where it always sat, the little tin of split shot still sealed, the label faded to a pale ghost of red. Inside it, underneath a neatly coiled line, there was an envelope with my name in his careful architect's hand. Katie girl, it began, and I had to sit down on the kitchen floor because my knees went unreliable. Don't be angry that I wrote. Talking is for the living. Paper is for what outlasts us. Take care of the house. Fix what needs fixing and leave alone what wants to be old. Invite people who feed you and send home people who drain you. Don't run so hard you miss the porch in a thunderstorm. You are not a mistake. The story they told about you is wrong. Write your own. I read it twice, then pressed the paper flat with both palms as if blessings could press farther into wood. When I looked up, Olivia was in the doorway, pretending she hadn't been watching me cry. She didn't ask to read it. She just handed me a glass of water and a dish towel, and the world reorganized itself into something I could carry. We built small rituals. On the first of each month, I hosted a found family weekend. My words, then everyone's. It started with 4, me, Olivia, Jennifer, and Martin, the retired teacher who had the exact same surgery 3 weeks before mine and called me kiddo, even though he's old enough to be my grandfather. We cooked overambitious meals, burned the garlic bread, argued softly about chess openings on the porch. By the 3rd month, there were 8 of us. Darius from the oncology floor with a laugh that made the loons jealous, Ruth, who crocheted while telling stories about New York in the 60s, Jackson, who repaired the wobbly dock plank without being asked, Sophia, who cried exactly once, quickly, like a cloud shedding one dark drop. No one asked for credentials at that table. Your admission was the way you had kept breathing when someone, somewhere, didn't show up. On the 4th weekend, Jennifer arrived late after a double shift and fell asleep sitting up in the porch chair, a paperback open like a tent across her chest. Olivia covered her with a blanket and tucked the corners in the way I imagine a mother might. I took a picture not to post but to keep, because there are moments you need a photograph of to remind you. This happened. This was real. I was loved enough to be watched over while I slept. I went back to painting. It came back like the smell of rain, a thing my body remembered before my mind granted permission. I set up a small table by the eastern window where the light stayed polite, and I painted small things. The cut bank where the turtles lined up like punctuation marks, the chipped red canoe, a glass of sunflowers on the kitchen table that tilted a little because the table did. When a Chicago coworker saw a canvas leaned against my office wall and asked if I'd picked up a new little hobby, I smiled. No need to explain that sometimes art isn't about talent or taste. Sometimes it's building a life you can stand inside. One Saturday, I was alone at the lake for the first time since we'd begun the weekends. The silence didn't scare me anymore. It felt like the inside of a cathedral at dusk. My phone buzzed and I almost didn't answer, but the screen said and I have learned that courage is not only for confrontations. Sometimes it's for conversations. Hi, sweetheart, she said. She had started practicing that word again, tripping over it like a new step. How is the lake? Quiet, I said. Perfect. There was a long breath on her end. Your father and I, we'd like to visit. Not this month. Not if you're not ready. But someday. We'd like to sit on the porch. Hear the loons. Not talk about the past unless you want to. Just be there. With you. I walked to the doorway where the light changed and looked at the porch where I'd sat with Grandpa 100 summer mornings, his coffee steaming, my feet bare enough to register the difference between old plank and newer plank. Someday, I said carefully. Boundary and invitation laid side by side like parallel lines. If we do it, we'll do it slow. Slow is good, she whispered. I could hear something in her voice I hadn't heard in years. Not certainty, not performance. Just trying. It's easy to mock trying the way the internet does. But in recovery, the bodies or the families, the smallest repetition is the architecture of change. That evening the sky turned that ridiculous Lake County pink, and I took the canoe out alone. I paddled to the shadow line where the pines mirrored themselves until water and tree were identical halves of a whole. The loons called, a tremolo like laughter and grief braided together. The dock lights from the far shore came on one by one like a string of notes. I set the paddle across my knees and let the canoe drift. And I said out loud, because sometimes you need to hear yourself say it, I'm not invisible. It wasn't a declaration. It was a description. I had a scar on my scalp and a deed in my name, and a set of house rules tacked to the fridge that started with, take your shoes off, and ended with, take care of each other. I had a desk at work where I left at 6, even if the campaign wasn't perfect. I had a text thread titled found with 12 names and 100 memes and 1,000 tiny lifelines. Family isn't something you inherit like a surname. It's something you practice. Show up. Apologize. Try again. Bring soup. Change the subject when someone is breathing too hard. Sit on the floor with them when the letter comes in the old tin box, and it kills you in the soft way. Celebrate their promotion without telling them what their sister would have done. I paddled home in the blue hour, the water dense as silk. On the porch, I lit the old brass lantern and set Grandpa's letter underneath, one corner tucked so the breeze wouldn't take it. The screen door sang its one note. Inside, the kettle clicked on, small and domestic, the complete opposite of a hospital monitor's alarm. I liked that reversal. I liked that my life now sounded like tea and laughter and a chess clock rather than sirens and request forms and the quiet of a phone that won't ring. Before bed, I wrote one more note and taped it beside Grandpa's rules. In my handwriting, a little crooked. Write your own story. Invite only the people who help you tell it. I turned off the porch light. The lake exhaled. Somewhere out on the water, a loon laughed, and for once, it didn't sound lonely. I went to sleep certain of a few simple things. That grief can be a clean river if you stop damming it, that a scar can be a crown if you face the mirror long enough. That family is not the people who talk about you in their captions, but the ones who carry in the groceries and don't let you fall asleep on a couch without a blanket. And that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, on a small patch of land in a world too big to hold, practicing the kind of love that shows up. Have you ever had to build your own definition of family? I hope you find your porch, your people, your letter. I hope you write the sentence you needed at 8 and hang it somewhere it can catch the light. And if your past calls you drama, teach it the quiet, stubborn grammar of showing up. The lake kept breathing. I kept breathing with it. If Monica's story found you, you're not alone. Drop a comment with the line you needed to hear tonight, or the one you're brave enough to write now. Tap subscribe for more true-to-life reckonings where betrayal breaks, truth speaks, and chosen family wins. Share this with someone who needs a reminder. Love isn't what they say. It's who shows up.